Welcome to the forefront of transformation. MSP+OS launched with a promise. Today, we deliver on that promise. Every day, every project. We're not just consultants. We are creators, innovators, leaders. Our journey has just begun, but our impact resonates. Together, we've turned challenges into opportunities and visions into realities. Now, we're ready to take the next leap, to amplify our reach, to elevate our game. This is MSP+OS. Visionaries, unite. Innovators, ignite. Leaders, let's conquer the new era of IT solutions. The future isn't waiting, neither are we. The live stream starts now.
Hey guys, it's Adam Belansky here, hosting another MSP+OS Unplugged event, and I'm excited to bring you insights and the cutting edge of the technology space. Today, we're going to dig in with my business partner, Bill Stucklen. He's our Chief Technology Officer, and Bill is spearheading a lot of our initiatives around hyperautomation, around technology, really pushing the envelope of technology, and can not only enhance and transform MSP businesses, but our organization as well. And today's topic is really talking about that, moving beyond proactive, how MSPs can really thrive in that hyperautomation, right? And so Bill's expertise can shed light on how to implement some of those advanced automation solutions, really to help refine that efficiency and get that service delivery, right? But beyond that, Bill is not just about technology. His passion for outdoors reflects kind of my personal feeling as well around everything that you do is like, it's all outgoing, it's outdoors, it's awesome. I love that approach. And why you ask, why I think that's a really unique thing about Bill is outdoors is because he brings the awesome Colorado environment out. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Bill on here because I'm a future resident of Colorado as well.
It's not a bad spot, Adam. Thank you for the wonderful intro. I hope I can bring some Colorado today to the conversation. I probably should have got some Colorado swag on, but we'll have to wait for the next time.
What's really cool, there's one thing I noticed when I was touring different states and so forth. I think a lot of, and we're going off topic here, a lot of Coloradoans, they really take pride in their state. We were driving around and there's a lot of state flags just outside their homes, and they just love, and I'm like, we noticed that. Nicole noticed that when we were driving around touring. So it was kind of interesting.
Very much. So, people, especially people that are natives of Colorado, are very proud of that. That's really like a badge of honor. And so certainly a lot of Colorado flags around, that's for sure.
Nice. So Bill, your journey in technology space is it's come a long way. I've known you for quite a few years. Can you share us kind of your journey and what drew you to technology space, and then really where you find yourself today?
Yeah, so I got my start doing tech support for video games. Some people may remember Doom, and it's in a lot of ways it's kind of my claim to fame is that that was my first tech job back in probably about 93, 94 time frame. And it just was, computers always came very easy to me. And I progressed, from tech support to managing a team into, being director of technology. And I ended up moving to New York City in the late 90s. And I got there right as the internet, the .com started coming out. And I jumped in full on into the .com world and bounced around in New York City for a long time in that. And again, it was all stuff that was very easy for me to comprehend and grasp this, incredibly rapid developing technology where, you were just trying to stay ahead of whatever the next .com needed to do and what they wanted to do from a development and an application and website hosting standpoint. Yeah. So it was really incredibly rapid. And that's how, I guess that's how I cut my chops in the IT space and, gained an awful lot of the knowledge that sort of led me to the next step in my career.
Nice. And so there's been obviously quite a few transformative milestones in your career. I know the most important, the most pivotal one is our initial peer group that we were in together.
Yes. Yeah. It was really interesting. The .coms had fallen apart I was living in New York City, 9/11 happens, and I was kind of, waiting to see what was going to happen next, where I was going to work. And I got a call from an old business partner who said, hey, I got an opportunity to start IT consulting. We always talked about it. Let's start IT consulting. And so we jumped right in. We started a company within a couple years. We were running ConnectWise, and at ConnectWise is where we ended up coming across this peer group. And, I don't want to date us too much, Adam, but this would have been probably mid 2000s, and there we were jumping around the country going to these peer groups. And that peer group was transformational, both for me as, a tech guy who was trying to run a business, as well as the relationships. Obviously, it led us to this point here. And a lot of the people and the community that developed around it was fantastic, real pivotal as I look back and say, how did I even get into being, an MSP, and then, providing and sharing my knowledge with other MSPs.
Yeah, it's been an awesome journey, and just seeing you grow and all the different things that you've been through since marathon days and now into Stack Advisor days. Talk us a little bit about that transformation, going through that from IT company to consulting.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We started Marathon, and that's where we met, right back in the peer group. And we had Marathon Consulting for about 15 years until we exited that into a much larger MSP. And through that time, we not only learned how to run a business, but we also were very lucky to be engaged, I think, with the early days of an MSP. So things were very reactive for a long time. And a lot of the sort of pioneers in our space started to talk about changing services and being, proactive, and how can you kind of get ahead of this, and the reoccurring revenue model. And over, a decade or so of that, we got really good at using the tools that ran an MSP, to the point that others started asking us for help. And that's what led us to spin off and start Stack Advisors. We'd gone through the bootstrap, so let's just start it all over again and go back and bootstrap another one. But it was really a rewarding move, to be honest, Adam, because it allowed me and my colleagues and all of the support from the people at Marathon Consulting to bring that knowledge that we had back to the community, to share those experiences that we learned many times the hard way, and be able to really help MSPs that were new to the space figure out how to be better, how to be more efficient, how to grow. And, ultimately, after a decade of doing that at Stack Advisors and doing a lot of, automation work and integration work, when the opportunity came to join forces, with you and the other organizations that we brought together to create MSP+OS, it was almost magical in a way, because we now started to fill all these gaps that individually we couldn't fill.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And so dig into that, right? And taking that your personal vision, what you saw in the industry, and kind of with our mission combining, how did you see that playing a role in the future of MSPs?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that we were always focused on that technical side. At Stack, we focused on the technical side, the automation, leveraging the tools to do as much automation as you can, starting to look at ways to bring, RPA or robotic process automation into the mix. The term hyperautomation that is now percolating around in our industry, and looking again at enterprise and how they were doing that stuff. And for us at Stack Advisors, it I don't want to say it was a narrow focus in that sense, but we really honed in on the technical side of things. So when we started to talk, with the other groups, there were gaps that we had. There were things that we couldn't necessarily provide, and we just saw those synergies of being able to say, hey, you need work on your business process, or you need coaching around that. You need some work, on how you're going to implement that within your PSA. And then we can come in and say, great, now that we have that and you have the process, how can we hyper automate that, right? Really automate that across multiple tools into that term, right? Hyper automation.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, let's dig deeper into that term, hyperautomation, Bill.
Sure.
Could you explain kind of what hyperautomation is, and why it's critical for MSPs today? Because I know it's just a term that gets tossed out a lot. It's been a lot around for a lot of different industries. Give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so to me, I think it's going to depend on who you ask and how they define hyperautomation. I like to take a little bit more of an agnostic approach to it, and look at hyperautomation as automation across products and automation between products. products, right? So if you look at most tools MSPs have, most tools even non-MSPs, MSP clients, there's a lot of automation, whether they're workflows or power automation. Those kind of things allow specific business processes to become more efficient, right? In the sense that you can take some of those menial tasks and really try to automate the menial labor out of it, make your team more efficient. When you look and start to talk to vendors that talk about, well, there's all these things that we can do. Some vendors say, hey, we can help you hyper automate in our single product. But to me, I think it's a much broader piece, because it's not just about automating the process, but it's about choosing the right process to automate and for the right reasons. And that's where I see it being really, really important when you look at and when you digest all the vendors that are telling you, you got to hyper automate to stay ahead. The reality is you also got to be careful. You can't just jump in and automate everything, because you're going to lose that touch. And MSPs, regardless of what software you use, it is all about that engagement with the client. And that's maybe the most important thing. So I like to look at hyperautomation as, how do you bring all of that mundane, how do you digest and process data to enable the engineers, the tech team, right, your account managers, your client account managers, to allow them to better engage the MSP. And the next step of that is going to be, how can you help those clients with their own automation and eventually their own hyper automation?
Yeah, that's a pretty good definition. So going beyond the traditional automation and right, can you provide maybe some significant advantages to how operational efficiency and maybe client satisfaction can be helped with that hyper automation or automation?
Yeah, and again, I think that each this, maybe I'll back up and say this is where part of the issue is that a vendor will say go hyper automate, but the reality is that hyper automation, it's those individual pieces of automation, and those are unique. Now there's commonalities for sure, like whether you look at analyzing time entry, maybe is a great thing that a lot of MSPs deal with, and a lot of the folks that we talk to is, how do you analyze time entry? How do you remove that process and make it so that time entry is reviewed, right? And whether that's through scripting or standards, et cetera, make that an automated process. Pull your service manager off of having to do that every single week for hours and hours. So that's one piece of automation that you can do that's fairly straightforward. And I don't even think you need to dabble in necessarily into things like AI to do that, right? AI is about cleaning up the data or modifying the data, maybe not always properly, right? But taking something like that and pulling the service manager out so we can focus on coaching, training. The next piece of that, a good example, is that once that moves over from the time entry sheets, it's going to go into invoices, right? And what can you do to automate that invoice piece? Now, we do a lot of stuff internally. A lot of MSPs use these tools. There's still manual work that can be automated in there. And if you look at, really what is that workflow that you deliver services? Take something from that, how do you capture what you're doing? And then how do you translate that over into an invoice that goes to the client, that leads that client to go, it's very clear to me what I'm getting, there's the value. A lot of that stuff can be automated, but what you don't want to do is then lose touch, right? You don't want to then turn around and lose that touch of having the conversation with the client about the services that you're providing.
Yeah, and so you've done a lot of work around that, and you've done a lot of work for our clients around that automation, and even considered some hyper automation, right? That has really dramatically transformed their operations, or the MSP as a whole, from client satisfaction. Can you kind of maybe give us some examples of, or an example?
Yeah, I'll give a really good example of something that actually affected us pretty dramatically at Stack, and it's a fairly simple thing. We didn't think much of it until we did it, and that was around ticket categorization. So we all were busy. We're all very busy. We're all working ticket categorization. Once we identified what that work was, it did two amazing things. One is it showed us that what we thought we were spending all of our time on wasn't actually where a majority of that time was. And the second piece is it revealed enormous amounts of automation for us. And when I talk to MSPs about, hey, it's great, we've all moved on from reactive, although I think there's still a lot of us that, a lot of MSPs that can still do that, but we think about proactive service. We think about getting ahead of it. Automation is about dealing with the incidents that come up. And automation is also about dealing with the manual process. And this, automation, hyper automation should not be about removing or taking away jobs. It is about making people more efficient. It is about getting rid of the mundane work that drives engineers nuts. It is, it is about removing those errors, right? It's about removing the discrepancies and creating a really consistent service, because that ultimately leads to value and client retention. When you identify what you're doing really granularly, and this is something that I think a lot of MSPs either struggle with or don't quite dial in, is you start to lose the ability to identify what it is that you're actually trying to automate. There's big, obvious processes, but when you start to see the amount of time that you're spending on something, the ideas can really flow, and you get your team involved, and the team, again, starts to identify those opportunities to really automate, which it makes them more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just look into the future a little bit. The pace of technology is obviously rapidly changing. It just seems like
Right.
with this AI and all this stuff is just it's constantly evolving and accelerating. Bill, from your expert perspective, what are the emerging trends around that hyperautomation that MSPs are really need to be
Yeah.
prepared for?
Security is an obvious one. So I'm not going to go down that path, nor would I necessarily, pretend to be a big security expert. It's vital. It's important. You need to make sure that you have somebody, that is aware of that. So security is, it's obvious, identifying and analyzing data. And to me, when I look at, AI is great. AI is content driven. AI makes a lot of mistakes. And any of us that have started to, really play with it and look at, well, let's not just use it to create, manage content, but let's start to actually ask it to perform actions for us. It's still short on a lot of that. So there's needs to be that human mind to say, what it is that we're trying to automate and how we're going to try to automate that. You can leverage AI to kick those tools in, or the ideas in place. When you get to the tools themselves, there's a few things that are really kind of, I think, making a mark, and people are trying to create a mechanism for automation. And that's, the term RPA, or robotic process automation, maybe just shorten it to process automation. This is about enabling an assistive technology as the engineers go down their path. There's a lot of people that are doing this. There's some great companies out there that are creating tools to help you with this. But again, you still got to know how to use those tools. These tools are not going to identify and tell you what to automate. They'll give you examples of it. But they're a really great step when we look at what is that next piece that comes into it, right? We all know workflows from PSA, and other tools that we use. Those are ways to kind of move data through the process, but it's the actions upon that. That's where I think you get that first layer of automation. The next trend, again, we're going to hear about hyperautomation. I think it's going to be a while until we see that be reality. The idea being, I get a request in for a new user. We'll use user onboarding. Very simple example. I get a request in for a new user. Really, I should be able to go process and do just about everything from provisioning accounts to rolling out the software, to deploying everything in a very easy way across to get that machine sent out. And then all of the time updated on the ticket. So the engineer really is the one that spot checks it along the way. But there are multiple tools in that process. And that's where hyperautomation starts to come. If you're not automating individual pieces, you can't jump into hyperautomation. I would say that there's not one tool that does hyperautomation today. It is about the people. It is about external, folks like us that help you identify the pieces of automation and how those can actually play across that technical stack.
Yeah, and that's when you talk about that and seeing those trends and so forth, those different layered approaches. I want to know, our audience also wants to know is, it's moving so fast. How are we as MSP Plus OS staying on top of that, right? Incorporating those trends into kind of our service delivery and staying ahead of that particular curve. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it's not necessarily a very straightforward answer. I think there's a few things that we do. One is the value that we brought to the table when we created MSP Plus OS was that connectivity to process automation. It's something that we've been looking at for a very long time. These tools are showing up very fast. I don't know if they're evolving as fast as they're popping onto the market and new terms are coming around for it. But what we can do with that, and where we like to really, position ourselves to help is not just leveraging the tools and the best way to leverage those tools, but making sure that you can leverage those tools in a secure way. And that when you configure one tool, you're thinking about what is that result? Where is that data going and what is the result for it? Because again, there's a lot of steps in this, and tying those together is really important. What we do internally with that, I think there's two things. One is that we're testing the tools when they come out. We've got brilliant people in this organization, and you know it, and they're really smart, and they use these tools and they provide feedback. Sometimes they're very verbose about the feedback they provide, but it's really great because they're using it in their day-to-day and saying, here's use cases for this. Here's ways that we see not only us being able to use these tools, but also our clients being able to use these tools. And that's the second piece of it, is that as an organization, the hundreds of MSPs and ITSPs that we interact with on a daily basis, from small to mid-market to enterprise and PE-backed organizations, they all have questions about it. They all are trying these tools, and they're all trying to find the right way to use the tools as fast as they can to stay ahead of, whatever the next innovation is. Well, that conversation, just from a conversation standpoint, gives us a deep insight into how other people in our space are using the tools. And that's incredibly valuable.
It is for sure. And that's where, I was asked at a show recently that I was at, and it's like I was served on an AI panel. It's like, hey, is there any one MSP out there that's like a staple to this AI? I was like, how can you establish a staple organization, in a single year? Like, it was November 2022, and it really kind of started picking up momentum in probably March of 23. So, we're just now about a year in using this. It's like, there's a lot of organizations using it in many different ways. I think we're still in the phase of figuring it out, learning what its capabilities are, and, beginning to trust, and then, grow and scale from that.
Well, and what's the right way to use it, right? And
Yep.
I'll use a very quick example around Copilot. Copilot's great about how it interacts, but it's also very different from where ChatGPT is. The way that you use those tools, although they tend to do the same kind of thing, it's very different. And you look at some of the advantages of one tool that lives within your Microsoft tenant and ultimately will allow you to theoretically start to create automation and analyze data and perform actions across multiple tenants. Like, that's where this is going. And if you look at the big players in the space, they're all talking about Copilot. They all might even be trying to use Copilot internally, but they don't have a good message about how MSPs can leverage it. And, that's a very interesting position to be in, because in a lot of ways, I feel, that we should be expected to already know exactly how Copilot works. Copilot's still figuring out how it works, right? Just like ChatGPT did a year ago. And so, this is where I think people are almost, nervously trying to jump right in without actually understanding what's the reality, what's the effect, what's the security risk, and how is all of this going to affect not just me as an MSP, but I'm going to have to consult, and my clients are going to start to ask about this, right? And it always happens. MSP clients tend to drive MSPs asking for solutions. And so that, I think, is coming, and I think it's very interesting because it's going to become less about consulting on, desktop support and fixing hardware. It is going to be way more about analyzing, identifying process, identifying automation, and saying, hey, what's the right tools outside of the MSP vertical or outside of enterprise tech that's going to help a small 30-person organization leverage the value of having assistive, AI in their day-to-day operations.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And so I'm gonna wrap. So today's conversation with Bill, it's been really awesome, deep diving into the exciting world of hyperautomation or just automation. It's really can be transformative and really huge potential for MSPs. And Bill, it's really been awesome, kind of hearing you speak around that particular topic, because I don't speak a ton around that. We're so many different committees in our organization,
Absolutely.
right? And it's rapidly evolving landscape, right? And so, Bill, I just want to thank you for taking your time and sharing your expertise and vision around that particular piece. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in live and left some comments and joined in on the discussion. your engagement really helps make MSP+OS Unplugged and really learn about our platform, the people behind the scenes. And so we are wrapping up our series around this particular MSP+OS Unplugged series this Thursday. And then so that'll be with Nicole. And it's really been about the vision, about the people behind the scenes, propelling MSP+OS and our clients forward to the future. And I want to say, until then, really keep pushing those boundaries. Let us know, what's possible. What are your ideas around those different things around technology? I am always staying at the forefront, and it's been an awesome journey so far. So, Bill, closing thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I agree. I think there is so much to come in the future, and probably the near future, that I feel very lucky to be in an organization that can kind of cover most of those bases, if not all of them. Right? It's really valuable, and it allows each one of us as experts to focus in and bring that back to our clients. And to me, that's one of the biggest reasons why this made so much sense, but also continues to drive me to be passionate, is about helping people and helping businesses, because it was so valuable for me when I was starting up and trying to figure things out.
Yeah, the passion is there. We absolutely love growing and scaling MSPs, so it's pretty awesome. Awesome, guys. All right, well, I'll be back on Thursday at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. So Thursday with Nicole Bylansky, wrapping this little series up. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bill.
Awesome.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you, everybody.